I think one of the biggest problems I've seen is what was called the fundamental option. And it's been taught formally and informally, but basically what it's saying is that you really can't commit a mortal sin unless you really want to rupture, or not rupture, to totally detach yourself from God. And unless that's that act of the will to really abandon God, you're not in mortal sin. And they're saying that you have to commit this mortal sin, the serious act, over and over and over again before it can be considered a mortal sin. And the fundamental option. And they're saying God is an all-loving God, and there's no such thing as real mortal sin in that case. And we know that, let's say in the sin of purity, a person knows it's wrong, they go ahead and commit the act of impurity. They're just selfish and they love themselves and they don't love God, but they're not telling God, I hate you, God, I don't want to be with you. They're committing this act and they're in serious sin. But boy, if you start getting in this fundamental option talk with teenagers and say, well, you're really not real serious sin, it's not a sin, unless you really want to cut your relationship with God. What is your comment on that?
That is not correct Catholic doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
That is
taught, though.
It is not correct Catholic doctrine. It is simply personal elucubration of some theologians. Yes. And they are not even good theologians. You see, one act, for a person to commit a mortal sin, it is not necessary for the person to make a formal declaration of rejection of God. Okay. It is enough to do actual bad act in a big thing. Mm-hmm. In order to crush a person with a car, it is not necessary to declare, I hereby decide to crush you with this car. It is enough to drive over the person. Right. You see, for example, in the Old Testament, David, he saw the wife of Uriah, and he called her and sinned with her once. Finished. Yes. The prophet came to him immediately and told him the consequences. The sword will never depart from your house. And he got Uriah killed only once, not twice. Yes. And the consequences were terrible. There were wars, his own son attacked him, he had to run away, his wives were taken by his son in open daylight, there was civil war, and there were people killed all over the place. And he continued to suffer. And the psalms and his tears, one act. Yes. And there are many more like that. Ananias and Sapphira told only one lie to St. Peter and lay there dead. They fell dead immediately. And there were many others. Judas sold Christ only once, not twice. These people who say you must repeat the act, how many times must I kill that person before it becomes a mortal sin? Must I kill half a dozen of them? How many? Can I get the key of his car? If I steal his car, a nice car that cost him $5,000. So he's really saying that one act of stealing that car is not a mortal sin yet. I must declare that I hate God before, and I must take 12 cars like that. No. It's not correct doctrine. There is no need comforting those who are tempted. We should tell them the truth, and the truth will make them free. Good theology tells us that if a person commits a seriously bad act, but there is lacking sufficient consent or sufficient freedom, then it may not be a mortal sin subjectively for that person. Right. But that is not because of the so-called fundamental option. It is because one of the qualities required for mortal sin is not there.
What are the requirements for mortal sin?
The requirements are, first, it must be a grave matter, a big thing in itself. Yes. Secondly, the person must have sufficient knowledge that it is a serious matter. Thirdly, the person must freely consent to do it. Not even to do it yet, not even do the whole thing, but consent to it, decide.
So he commits a mortal sin even when he consents.
The moment he decides.
Right.
So if a person decides to rob a bank,
Yes.
and the moment of decision is already a mortal sin, ever before he reaches the bank, if he reaches there and the police shoot him down, too bad for him. He is already in mortal sin.
That's right.
If a person decides to sin with a woman and then begins to look for the woman, he is already in mortal sin.
Now,
Already.
Aren't sins of impurity, aren't they mortal sins? I mean, most people out there don't think they are.
Well, they are mortal sins. It's very clear. What St. Paul says that fornicators will not enter into the kingdom of heaven. What other teaching does a person want?
Yes.
Indeed, any of the commandments, when it is a grave matter, the person knows it and consents. The person is in mortal sin.
Yes.
There are times when the individual will be in doubt whether it was a mortal sin or not. The person should go to confession and confess it.
Yes.
And say, Father, this is what I did. I do not know whether it was a mortal sin or not. But it means the person already knows it is a sin.
Yes.
It's only now whether it is mortal or not. And the person should give then, if a person really loves God, the person will want to avoid all sin.
I know I've heard one person say that, well, I mean, if you don't go to Mass on Sunday, God's not going to send you to hell for that. And the fundamental option was just taken into that again, you know.
The third commandment is a serious one. It's not a joke. God wants us to worship Him, and we should go to Mass, at least on Sunday, says the church. The church specifies and says, at least on Sunday. And to make it less difficult, it can even be on Saturday evening, if it is in your area possible. If the person does not go to Mass, we will just apply one of the rules for mortal sin. First, is it a grave matter? Yes. Does the person know it's a grave matter?
Yes.
We are not sure. If one of these theologians deceived him, then the theologian will have the fault. Only God will decide that.
Yes. Okay.
Does the person consent sufficiently? Again, we are not sure. Suppose there is a serious reason for not going to Mass. If the person was seriously sick, then that becomes a serious reason. If it's a mother and the little baby is very sick, we don't expect the mother to abandon the baby and go to Mass. All that. But if none of those reasons applies, it's simple laziness and nothing else, then the person need not expect any comfort from any theologian that is a good theologian.